Greater Creators is a study of creative icons who push the boundaries of art and whose influence can still be felt today. So take a seat, class is in session. Today we're talking about the man who defined the look of the sword and sorcery genre, the fantastic Frank Frazetta. Hey class, I'm Comic Book Girl 19. Welcome to Greater Creators. When I say words like barbarians, warriors, battle axes, what kind of imagery comes to mind?
I don't know, but I'm paying attention now.
For most of us, phrases like swords and sorcery and even things like Dungeons and Dragons evoke these depictions of these grand scenes of these muscle-bound heroes swinging an axe, slicing up these armies of enemies with a scantily clad female at his feet.
Yes!
This image owes an incalculable debt to Frank Frazetta, the late Brooklyn-born illustrator whose name is forever intertwined with Conan, Tarzan, and even Molly Hatchet.
Ooh, I think this is gonna be my favorite episode.
It's gonna be a good one. What I love most about Frank Frazetta's artwork is the primal feelings that it evokes. People have described his work as dramatic and powerful, emotional and expressive. He was really able to create an atmosphere in his artwork that you can really feel. It's like this other world that you can teleport into that seems completely there, despite being a total fantasy. Frazetta's weapons of fantasy warfare included watercolors, oils, inks, and pencils, which he used to create lush and captivating images full of glory, action, and purpose.
Like what kind of stuff did he do?
Well, Robot, Frank Frazetta was a commercial artist with his larger-than-life images leaping off of movie posters, book covers, and comics. He also helped to define the look of literary heroes like Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian and Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars. He also illustrated the characters of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and even worked on some Battlestar Galactica. This guy's worked on a lot of stuff. Like, a lot. All right, class, now let's talk about some of my favorite Frank Frazetta paintings. Example 1, Death Dealer from 1973.
Oh.
Here is one of Frank Frazetta's arguably most famous painting. We have a frightening warrior in armor with a horned helmet sitting atop a brooding stallion. Notice the vultures in the background give the ominous feeling like there's a bunch of corpses around, they're getting ready to eat them. The environment feels like this battle has just taken place, and the central focus of the warrior's threatening eyes is looking directly at the viewer, as if he's just killed a bunch of people and he sees you peeping on him, and you're next.
Oh.
There is a very supernatural and ghostly element to Death Dealer, and this is just a painting that dudes just go ape for. They love this painting.
I really love this painting.
This is a painting for dudes, by dudes. And fun fact, the Death Dealer painting was so popular that it went on to spawn its own novel series following its creation. That's right, people loved this character so much that they had to write books about him, all right?
A novel series? What's that about?
Well, Robot, the first book in the series is called Prisoner of the Horned Helmet, and in it we have Goth of Ball. He's just a man, although he's not just any man, he's a total badass. His parents were killed in front of him when he was a kid, and he's been on his own in the forest, just like being a badass in the forest.
Yes, badass.
And then there's this horde of invaders called the Kizaks, right? And they're like taking over the land. And this chick named Cobra is like heard of this guy in the forest. She's like, man, we could use his help. She goes to the forest. She leaves this mystical helmet that like is possessed by the god of death, right? And then like as soon as Goth touches this friggin' helmet, he cannot take the helmet off and he's turned into the Death Dealer.
Wow, so he was a badass who became an even badder badass.
Yes.
This is the kind of story that I've been waiting for.
We'll go to the used bookstore later, okay, Robot? We'll see if it's there. 3 other novels would follow his adventures.
Oh.
And years later, there's a comic book series as well, then a role-playing game. That's how popular this one painting was. It spawned 4 books, comics, role-playing games, which spawned a slew of other Death Dealer paintings.
Oh, show me.
All right, calm down, Robot. Here we have Death Dealer 2. He's no longer on his horse, and he's just chopping people up the old-fashioned way while standing on a pile of his victims.
Oh, man.
Death Dealer 3, we have Death Dealer just hanging out, contemplating life, and possibly death.
And some skeletons.
You gotta chill out. stop and smell the death. Here we have Death Dealer 4, where he's getting ready to fight a giant lizard creature in a swamp.
Oh, swamps.
This is right up your alley, Robot.
There's another dead guy in the bottom, too.
Although, yeah. The series continues with Death Dealer 5. Here he is on the castle walls, throwing bitches over the side of the wall with his axe.
Yeah, get him.
It's pretty crazy.
This is the best class I've ever taken.
And finally, we have Death Dealer 6. Here he is back on top of his horse, only this time he's battling a snake.
A snake.
An evil snake. It's scary.
Cool. This is so cool.
Now let's move on from Death Dealer to one of my personal favorite Frank Frazetta works. Example number 2, Woman with the Scythe from 1974. This sword and sorcery image has a witchy woman seemingly casting a spell. And I was so inspired by this work that I did my own Frank Frazetta styled cosplay based around this image.
You did? Well, let's see it.
Here it is. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Wait a minute, where's the hair? You didn't do the hair right.
I know, the wig got all messed up. It didn't work out at all, so I just had to ditch it and go with my own hair. But it worked out great.
I don't see a giant lizard in there either.
Well, I'm working on a budget here, right? Give me a break. I did, however, have a snake.
Well, then I'll pass you.
Example 3, we have Conan the Destroyer from 1971. Like Death Dealer, there would be many Frazetta Conan paintings. This one in particular shows him just killing a bunch of people single-handedly as they're piling up dead beneath him.
Yes.
You can't really get more macho than this.
Macho.
Anyways, this painting was later sold in 2010 as the highest valued piece of Frazetta artwork of all time, bought by a private collector for $1.5 million.
Wow, it was worth every penny.
I wonder where he put it. Like, is it in his kitchen?
I would mount it on the ceiling of my bedroom.
Fun fact, the Destroyer painting was actually a revision of an earlier painting, Conan the Buccaneer.
Teacher, why did he repaint it?
Well, Space Brain, if you notice, Conan doesn't have any weapons. He's strangling a guy with his bare hands. And Frank said that he felt like he wanted to give Conan a fighting chance, so he repainted him, this time with a battle axe.
Oh.
Now let's talk about Frank Frazetta's personal history. A handsome, well-dressed ladies' man, Frazetta was a natural visual storyteller from his beginnings in comics to the illustrations that are now synonymous with his name. As he once explained to Seconds magazine, "I love storytelling, and now I do it in one page. I like to think that my paintings have a beginning, a middle, and an end when you look at them."
Oh, so you think he's hot, huh?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact, Robot. Frank Frazetta was a total hunk. Google him. I'm not kidding. In fact, Frank Frazetta kept himself in really great shape because he would use himself as a reference model for his own paintings.
Whoa, he was pumped.
He was ripped, Robot. It's ripped. That's how you say it.
I'm kind of ripped, too. Check out these buttons. Rock hard buttons.
Frank was 3 years old when he sold his first crayon drawing to his grandma for a penny. By the time he turned 8 in 1936, some of his teachers had been encouraging his parents to enroll him in the Brooklyn Academy of Fine Arts.
How come you never encouraged me to join the academy? Have you even seen my fish monster drawing? It's great for my age.
It's a wonderful drawing, Robot. You may not be quite ready for the academy, but young Frank totally was. This is one of my favorite stories about Frank Frazetta. So the deal was his parents take him to the academy. Now there's this guy there who runs it named Michael Falanga, who's this amazing fine artist, right? And he's seen a lot of people bring their kids in saying how great their kids are, and they're always garbage kids, and he's like, whatever. So not young Frank, all right? He sits this kid down. He gives him some stuff to draw with. He gives him a picture of ducks or something. He's like, hey, I need you to copy this picture of ducks, and he leaves. He comes back, and apparently he was so impressed with what Frank drew that he snatched it and started running down the halls screaming, "Mamma mia, we have a genius on our hands."
How come you never said Mamma Mia at my drawings?
Moving on. Frank studied at the Brooklyn Academy of Fine Arts for 8 years and left when it shut down when he was 16 to go on to become a professional artist. That's right, this guy was working professionally as an artist at 16 years old.
Wow, impressive.
It's very impressive. As a teenager and young man in the 40s and 50s, Fritz, as he would sometimes sign his stuff, found work drawing Western, mystery, fantasy, and animal comics, as well as his own books. His version of Flash Gordon was a shirtless brute capable of pummeling alien monsters with his fists when he wasn't hanging out with hot, topless chicks.
Did you say topless chicks?
That's right, Robot. One of the many things that Frank Frazetta was very proficient in drawing was the female form. In fact, Frazetta is just as famous for his babes as he is for his barbarians, and we would be scolded by art historians around the world not to bring up his voluptuous ladies.
You know, I'm pretty good at drawing my barbarians, and my babes are getting pretty good too.
I don't see any woman drawings. I don't think you're capable of drawing a lady yet. Show me a woman drawing you've done.
I'm working on it right now.
All I see is monsters and skeletons and weird...
You're right, I can't draw girls.
Learn how to draw women, and then you can go to the academy. Even though Frazetta loved to draw the ladies, he settled down with one and one only. In 1956, Frank married a woman named Eleanor Kelly, who became both his business partner and model, as well as the mother of Frank's 2 sons and 2 daughters. His Buck Rogers illustrations led to a stint as an extra hand for Al Cap's now iconic Little Abner comic strip. He was also instrumental in putting together Little Annie Fanny for Playboy magazine, and his work for Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella is the stuff of pop culture legend. Frazetta worked in comic books for around a decade. However, after 1954, there was a long period where he suddenly couldn't get work anymore.
Why couldn't he get work anymore? Was he a slacker?
Frazetta was in no way a slacker. You see, in 1954, comics were attacked by mainstream society after psychologist Frederick Wortham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, convinced a nation into scapegoating comic books as the cause behind juvenile delinquency. The entire comic book industry, which was huge at the time, was nearly destroyed, with artists and writers unemployed across America. Frank even had worked on some of the EC comics, which were at the heart of the congressional hearing that ruled against comics and put the company out of business.
What? People really thought comic books were the worst thing ever?
Yes, they thought that they were making children into violent criminals and they had to be stopped, so they started the Comics Code, which was really stupid.
Really? Comic books?
Yes, and it's incredible that someone as talented as Frazetta couldn't get work, but that was the environment of the time. And this particular incident affected all of the greater creators of the 40s and 50s. In 1965, Frazetta pivoted into doing movie posters.
Movie posters?
That's right. After someone from United Artists picked up a copy of Mad Magazine with Frazetta's satirical drawing of Ringo Starr on the back, the studio offered Frank his first movie gig. This resulted in the poster for What's New Pussycat, the 1965 Peter Sellers comedy written by Woody Allen. And this single job paid him what he was used to making in an entire year of creating comic books.
Wow, comic books don't pay well, I bet.
No, they don't. And they still don't. More movie work followed, including now classic posters for Hotel Paradiso, The Fearless Vampire Killers, and Mad Monster Party. Now let's take a minute to talk about Frank Frazetta's compositional elements. Here we have a standing warrior with a woman at his feet, a staple of fantasy paintings, but if you take a closer look, you'll notice how the figures in the ground form a triangle.
Oh, it is a triangle.
This composition can be found in many of Frazetta's works. He was a master of using the golden triangle composition.
It's like Doritos.
Yes, Robot, he was inspired by Doritos. You get an A+. The thing about triangles is that they give you this dynamic movement in your paintings, instead of having this static image, like a square. It's boring, it's static. Triangles, on the other hand, are exciting. Let's take a look at some of the other paintings with triangle composition. Here we got Conan saying, "Come at me," with his triangle composition. We also have one dude trying to kill another dude with another chick down there, and their heads form a triangle.
And also, it's got a snick composition.
In this Snick painting, we have more triangle compositions.
Is this one triangle composition too?
Absolutely. Check it out. Look at these characters. They form a triangle. Also, this woman and her cat. Triangle composition. Even Death Dealer's got that triangle composition going on.
Yeah.
And you can see this method in many other paintings and photographs, such as the Mona Lisa and raising the flag over Iwo Jima. Of course, Frazetta is best known for his paintings, but he didn't actually get started painting until he was 30 years old. When he finally did pick up a paintbrush, he began creating realistically styled fantasy book covers and unleashed a hidden talent that would forever place his mark on art.
Really?
Really. He's like responsible for the whole sword and sorcery genre of art. Not kidding. Frazetta's cover for Conan the Adventurer, a 1966 collection of Weird Tales magazine stories, redefined the look of Robert E. Howard's Sumerian warrior, and truthfully an entire genre. Howard's depiction was quite different, Frazetta recalled some 30 years later. He was leaner with tousled hair and hawkish features. I instead saw a bruised, battered, scarred monster of a guy. Countless Conan book covers followed, as well as covers for Burroughs books about John Carter and Tarzan. In the 70s, Frank Frazetta was creating mostly fantasy book covers, and any book that had one of his illustrations would sell so well that at one point, publishers came to him to ask what other paintings he had laying around in order to buy that painting from him and then have a writer write a story to go around that painting. That's nuts!
Eventually, I plan on someone writing a novel to go with my fish monster drawing. That way, I don't have to write it myself and I can free myself up to become a professional dancer.
All right. Frank's vision of Conan the Barbarian redefined the character and popularized him so much that there were a pair of movies made about him in the 1980s starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, in which, ironically, Frank Frazetta did not illustrate the movie posters for.
Why not?
I don't know. One of history's biggest mistakes. The general blood and thunder vibe of Frazetta paintings pairs very well with heavy metal. Even though Frazetta himself wasn't much of a rock music fan, rock bands were definitely fans of him. Molly Hatchet introduced Frazetta to generations of headbangers when the band used his paintings for 3 of their album covers. He's equally beloved by filmmakers and screen legends. According to Frazetta's friend and diehard supporter, Doc Dave Winiewicz, Frank wouldn't leave his house to see anybody. So famous fans like Clint Eastwood, Sylvester Stallone, and Robert Rodriguez would fly to Florida to visit him. George Lucas even flew all the way out to meet him and reportedly was super nervous. Fun fact, the slave Leia costume was inspired by one of Frank Frazetta's paintings called the Egyptian Queen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Love that slave Leia.
Don't we all?
When are you gonna cosplay a slave Leia?
Never. It's done to death. And Frank didn't just work on comic books and movie posters. In the early 80s, he even collaborated on an animated feature film, Fire and Ice, with director Ralph Bakshi.
And sworn enemy of the Ice Tyrant. Their courage will be tested. The challenge must be met. The final battle between the armies of the cold and the keepers of the flame is about to begin. Fire and Ice, from the visual imagination of Ralph Bakshi and the dazzling artistry of Frank Frazetta.
In our last examples, let's take a look at some of the pen and ink work of Frank Frazetta. Now, we all know that he loved to paint, but of all the materials that he's ever used in his life, he said that his favorite thing to do was to work within the pen and ink style. In this drawing, we have a caveman. He's getting ready to go out, maybe find some food, I don't know. But what I do know is that the line work in this is so amazing. Like, it has so much movement, like the way he moves the pen and the directions just like really gives you a sense of motion. Same thing here. In the pterodactyl's wings, we have all these really cool different lines going in all these different directions that are just really draw your eye. Look at how much motion that there are in these lines. It's motion. It's just happening. In the 1990s, Frank was diagnosed with a thyroid condition and had a series of strokes, which eventually led to him losing the use of his drawing hand.
Oh no.
Oh no is right. That would end most artists' careers, but not Frank Frazetta. This guy was such a badass that he taught himself to use his left hand to paint equally as well as he had with his right hand.
What?
That's crazy.
With his left hand. Nobody can draw with their left hand.
Oh yeah? Well, Frank Frazetta did. All right, so the story goes that him and his wife Ellie are hanging out one night, okay? He's had these strokes, like he can't use his right hand anymore, but like he sees this painting that he gave her called the Maasai Warrior, and he's not happy with the face, you know? And this is a guy who's like, if he's not happy with it, he's gonna go back into it. So he takes it down, he scrapes the face off of it, okay, ruins the painting, and Ellie's like, oh my gosh, like how is he gonna do this? He's like, I'm gonna learn how to use my left hand. She gets like so nervous, she can't even watch, she just goes to bed. And then the next morning, she wakes up, she comes downstairs, and like, the face is better. Like in one night, he taught himself how to use his left hand. She was just like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. The face was 100% better. And that's the story.
Wow. Space Baron can't draw with any of his hands, because he doesn't have any. Huh.
That's rude, robot. Frank lived to be 82, passing away from stroke-related complications in 2010, a year after his wife Ellie had passed away. In an interview with Empire magazine late last year, on the eve of auctioning his extensive Frazetta collection, Doc described his late pal as just a good guy. He wasn't a snob, but he suffered fools very poorly. You could have a beer or a cup of coffee with him and just talk normally with him, but he could deepen his level of conversation depending on what you brought. He was just that bright. He never catered to the art industry, Doc added, and he didn't seek out the art galleries on Madison Avenue or exotic publishers. They all came to him. And my favorite quote from Frank is, good or bad, the one thing I can say about my art is, if I can quote Sinatra, I did it my way.
Teacher, how do you feel about Frank Frazetta, honestly?
How do I feel about Frank Frazetta? Well, I think Frank Frazetta is a super badass, okay? This guy was just like, comes from a time where like they just don't make people like that anymore. Like I don't know what was going on, but he comes from the greatest generation, and like that label totally applies to this guy. He's like working at 16, it's ridiculous. He's also like super ripped and cares about how he looks, and then is also like good enough to be on a baseball team potentially, but then he just likes drawing a whole bunch. It's just like, what? He's so cool. All right, class, now it's time for your homework assignment. Take a deep dive into Frank's fantasy world with the 2006 documentary, Frazetta, Painting with Fire. Or if you live in and around Pennsylvania, you can take a field trip to the Frazetta Art Museum located in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. And also be sure to check out Frazetta art books, specifically Legacy and Testament. These are two of the best 4 Frazetta art books in existence. Join us next time on Greater Creators, where we're going to discuss the works of other amazing creators who influenced generations. Class dismissed.